We're going to be speaking to Roy Teague, serving police officer, who's written a book or co-authored a book with John Hanson, Policing the Haunted Skies, which I'm sure that our listeners and everybody out there will be absolutely thrilled to read when it is available in print. Roy will tell us shortly all about that. A little bit about Roy. He served in the army from the age of 16 for 6 years, Northern Ireland and Bosnia. From there, he went on and joined the police, and he's been in the police force now for 22 years. Now an inspector and working on the Armed Response Unit. Roy, welcome to Truth Proof.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. It's honestly, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you. And we have spoke before, but to get it on the show, listen to some of these accounts, fabulous. How did you become interested, Roy?
I mean, it's been a long-standing thing for me, Paul. So I've been interested in this sort of topic, shall we say, since I've been a kid. You know, I can remember my dad, he took me to the cinema to watch E.T., you know, and I kind of always been interested in the thought of, you know, what's out there, life on other planets, very cognizant of the fact that we are a very small, pale blue dot in an infinite cosmos. And, you know, since I've been a kid, I've been thinking it can't just be us. There's got to be something out there. And of course, I think most of the population of the planet probably believe there is, you know, there is other life out there on other planets. But the big question is, which is what a lot of people do struggle to swallow, is have any of those civilizations from other planets come here, and do they continue to do so? So I think that's the main question. I've always been interested in it, buddy, since I've been a kid.
And is it something that's spurred from other family members, or is it just something that you've nurtured yourself?
It's kind of self-nurtured, really. You know, it's just you know, if you grow up liking music, you know, you become, you know, you Beethoven. If you like films, you go on to become like a great director, a great actor. I'm just really interested in ufology, and that's been kind of one of my main sort of focuses and interests from as a kid up until now, and it'll never stop. It'll always just keep going on. So for the family members, no, believe it or not.
No. Well, you know, and why should it be like that? But you know, sometimes, or a lot of times, it is. I'm mindful of the fact, serving police officer, and I'm respectful of that fact as well. And I hope people, when they're sending the questions in block capitals, please, listeners, tonight will be the same. And 22 years ago, Roy, could you have spoken about this subject openly like you are doing now?
Yeah, if you wanted a really short career,
right?
Because, you know, it's, you know, I'll be honest with you, I'll lay it on the line. When you're serving, you know, as a police officer, it's quite frowned upon, or it certainly was, to have an interest in this sphere, because unfortunately we have to acknowledge that it has attracted in the past, and it perhaps continues to do so. It does attract people who aren't of sound mind and body, who may have mental health issues and so on and so forth. And because that does happen, I think we all get tarred with that brush.
Yeah.
So when you then join, you know, the police service, or the police forces, as I like to call it, it's become a bit of a service over the last 20 years, but that's another story. When you join the police service, I think the powers that be are afraid that it brings negative credibility, you know, on the service. So I think it is still a little frowned on to this day. There have been officers in the past who have come out and said they've seen certain things, and so on and so forth, and it has cost them the jobs. And I think it wouldn't happen now, touch wood, but back in the past, I think that constables, of sergeants, inspectors, whatever rank, if they've come out and said about a sighting or an experience they've had, or got involved in the topic, they've almost been drummed out of the service, if you like. I don't think that would happen anymore, but I'm talking back in the 70s, the 80s, you know, early 90s. I don't think people were as open-minded back then, and it was a subject to be feared. It didn't get the the respect that it deserved, that perhaps it does now. And I think that the reason the police are not as afraid of it as they used to be is the simple fact that we've come a long way in the last 20 years. There's been a lot more cases have come out. You've got the military and even our own governments have released some quite startling footage on YouTube of all sorts of UFOs around military naval battle groups in the Pacific, which we've seen recently with the Tic Tac. And I think the new fashionable phrase is UAP, isn't it? So we see a lot of UAP footage. I think people are more open to it now. I think they're more open. So, and I've noticed that from the police to the military to politicians. I can recall seeing an interview with, ex-President Obama, probably, 9 or 10 years ago on the Jimmy Kimmel show. And he was very sort of, they know what questions they're going to get. I'm not naive to think that they get ambushed with these questions. So so he's got this question for Jimmy Kimmel, when you were sworn in, if it were me, I would have asked about aliens and Area 51, and did you do that? And he said yes. And he was asked to comment, and he just said, well, there are some things I can't say. And he kind of like brushed over it. Now, in contrast, he was interviewed about 12 months ago by James Corden, who's made a big name for himself in the States. And the interview was, he was a lot more open. And what he did say was, when he was asked the question again, was there are craft in the sky and they move at certain speeds and trajectories, and their movable patterns aren't easily identifiable, I think, with the terms he used. And that is all he would say. Yeah. But that is, he's giving the answer, and he's saying, yes, there are things out there, but they just lack that last little bit of, but I believe they're piloted by creatures.
Yeah, they're just not going the full 100%. And
yeah, there is a reason for it, I do believe, Paul. And I think the reason is that no, the governments won't admit this, and the military, because if we do, what we're admitting is that we aren't the biggest kids on the block, and that we have got craft or extraterrestrial biological entities coming to this planet in our airspace. There's not a thing we can do about it. And if they wanted to, they can do whatever they want, and we've got no way of stopping them. And I think they're concerned that will instill fear in the populace. Yeah. But for me, it's a bit of a moot point, because look, we both know if they wanted to do that, we wouldn't be here now.
We would be powerless. Anything with that kind of capability to evade our top fighter jets and military tech.
It's quite funny though. You watch the footage and they toy with the jets.
Yeah. If Roy, the footage we're watching is not our own tech, and I'm so kind of sat on fence here, because I'm an 100% belief that we are being visited, or this phenomena is already here. But when we're talking about the Tic Tac footage and things like that, could it be our own?
Yeah, so there's an organisation called the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is quite a new thing, 18 months old. And President Biden signed a presidential order, which basically meant that all of our agencies, United States Air Force, the Navy, the FBI, and all of the other agencies, some of which don't like to talk to anybody about anything. So there's a presidential order that they will cooperate, and they will give information to the Anomaly Resolution Office, so that the specialists within that office can come to a determination of what the craft is. And the reason I mention that, Paul, is because there's only 1 or 3 categories that they class these craft are. So, and these are the craft where, once you've ruled out things like, aircraft, satellite, meteorites, lanterns, laser displays, RC models, all this stuff, when you've ruled out all of the obvious ones, and at the end of this very long list of plausible reasons, once you've ticked those off, you might have something. They'll take a look at it. And when they take a look at it, like I said, they can only come out with a rule of 1 or 3 things. It's either the United States secret intelligence, which is craft they're testing. It could be foreign secret craft, which another foreign country is testing. And the third one, it just says one word, other.
Other.
And that's the thing. And that's the thing that I am interested in. What is other? We know what it is, but nobody will say it in the government. But I am impressed with the great strides that we have made in the last 2 and 3 years with this footage that has come out, and the fact that we have got an organisation, gone are the days, or I suppose they probably have. I'm not naive to think that they haven't got some project that we don't know about off the books, but back in the day it was Operation, I think it was Sign, then it was Grudge, then it was Blue Book, and so on and so forth. But at least now when we have them, they'll say, yeah, we've got a project, we are looking at it, and this is what it's called, and it answers to Congress. Now, of course, we're only talking about the United States.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. Let's just throw nets out a bit.
So, but of course, they're kind of, I don't know, they seem to be the go-to because of Groom Lake, S4, Area 51, and all the rest of it. Where some of the big incidents have occurred, like Roswell and so on and so forth.
So, to jump from that, and the answer that you gave originally when you were talking about the attitude of the force 22 years ago and now, do you think that goes across all professional bodies such as fire brigade? I know it's speculation, Roy, but do you think there's a mindset within all the professional bodies to put a certain words and terminology out there that they don't, and I'm not trying to trick you into words here. All I know is I spoke to a very high up Coast Guard, and he said we are trained in what not to say to the public, and you will never find an official Coast Guard report, Maritime Coast Guard Agency report, that talks about unexplained phenomena or a UFO or anything.
Yeah, so for example, I guess it depends whether for example, the Coast Guard, the firefighter or the police officer, I guess it depends whether they're on duty or not. Now, if you were on duty and you had a close encounter of the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever you want to call it, whatever it was, you were on duty. So to then give an interview about it to the press, the powers that be wouldn't like that, because you're giving an interview and you're commenting while you were on duty, about something. So for that reason, before you were to give any comment, you would end up going through, certainly in the police, you'd end up going through the Force Press Office. And I imagine that's why a lot of the comments are cleaned up. So the Coast Guard have probably got their equivalent. Yeah. So you might have someone say, I saw this, it was a craft, it was cigar shaped or saucer or whatever, and you'll probably get the Coast Guard try and tone that down. But let's say at the end of it, the member of staff, the policeman, the firefighter, or the Coast Guard, or whatever, said, no, I am going to talk about it and I'm going to say what I saw. I think the punishment for those individuals is a lot less now, because the public are a lot more inclined to believe those people, and we don't have to be shunned as much as we used to.
But I kind of,
I think it is better to answer your question now.
Yeah, I could kind of see why you would also not want to come out openly, because it could be seen as not interfering with evidence, but just you're talking about something that could be some kind of case that's going on while you've seen this thing. Yeah,
so then it would put you in the police in a location where we might not want to, let's say, a defendant know, or the barristers or whatnot. So yeah, but what I can say, if that was the case, I am pretty confident that the officer in question would then say, well, okay, I am going to talk about it, but I'll wait till the conclusion of this case. So you might wait a year, 18 months or whatever. So sorry if you asked me about the, is it attitude change after 22 years? And I kind of went off in a bit of a tangent there, but
Roy, it's good. It's brilliant getting an insight, because I'm not sure that I've heard a serving police officer talking about the subject, and I think it's great that we can do this.
It's rare. I don't know of any others. I know some that did, and it cost them the job. For example, you've got I think it's Gary Hesseltine. I think he did like 24, 25 years in British Transport Police, and he ended up writing to all the chief constables saying, if you get any UFO reports, I'd like to investigate them. And he was given the thumbs up to do that by his chief. And then later on, when it caused embarrassment to the chief constable, there was a denial that ever took place. And eventually, his life was made a bit unbearable, and he exited the police stage, left. And of course, you've got Alan Godfrey, haven't you?
Yeah,
he did his TV interview about his experience that in Tormorden. I can never pronounce it properly, but you know, he claims his life was made hell, and of course he then left the force and so on and so forth. But I don't think we'd go to those extremes now, just because the public are more open.
We're just not as blinkered, Roy, are we? So jumping to Policing the Haunted Skies, and we've had John Hanson on, who's an ex-detective, as you know yourself. How did you get along with working with John?
I mean, we didn't always see eye to eye on.
He's probably listening.
No, we didn't always see eye to eye. But what I can say is that you know, if it wasn't for John, I wouldn't have been involved in the book. No. So I owe John Hanson pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And when I say not see eye to eye, I don't mean as in on a personal level. I mean, sometimes it'll be, well, I think the book should be this, I think the book should be this, and sometimes I think no, he's wrong. And then when he explains it, I think, oh, the guy's got a point. And
yeah,
you're never going to be agreeing 100% with people. But I mean, he's a great investigator. You know, very very shrewd, very clever, and very good at what he does. And I mean, this all started. The collaboration started when I bumped into John, you know, four years ago, I guess it was, at RAF Woodbridge, because they were having Colonel Holt come over and do a talk about the Rendlesham Forest incident and what had gone on there, and so on and so forth. And of course, when you start to speak to somebody who's in the police or has left the police, you already got I don't know how to explain it. It's like old military buddies. When you meet up, it's like you've never been apart, or you don't know. You've got like you have a bond with them, you know. And he did. I think he served like 26, 27 years, and he was in the same force as me, you know, West Midlands. And I knew he'd been interested in because he's written loads of books. He's written the Haunted Skies book. So we just got talking about the police, or the job as we call it. We got talking about Rendlesham Forest, and then just the topic in general. And you know, and I can't remember who broached the subject, but I've always been interested in putting all the police sightings together in a book, and I know John had as well. So it was like a natural progression that John's got a massive archive of UFO sightings, which is called Great British UFO Archive, and I'll plug it on here because it's fantastic and he's done a great job. And it literally is, you know, from the 1940s to 50s. Every year, he's got as many sites as he can crammed in there. And you'll say, what about this site? And he'll go, that was 1956. And he'll be in there and he'll find it and he'll pull it out. And he's very good. So what he did, he said, he's going to go through his archive. He's going to get all the police sightings out. And then what I said I'd do is I'd go on the internet. I'd trawl the internet for police sightings. And then what I also then did was I did an appeal via the Police Federation of England and Wales. So I got into the magazine there, which is read by, like, you know, 100,000 officers, whether serving or retired. I'll just put, you know, saying if you've ever had a UFO experience in the police, if you've been a serving police officer or you've had a sighting, whether this is before you've joined the service, during or after, I want to hear about it. And I also sent the same appeal into what's called the NARPO magazine, which is the National Association of Retired Police Officers, and I appealed there. But all in all, at the end of the day, I probably got about 120 replies from police officers or police staff saying, look, I never said, it's usually the same thing. I didn't say this because I would have been made a laughing stock of the force, and my credibility would have gone. But now the you know, the dynamics of ufology have changed and it's more open. They were like, and it was like they were getting something off the chest. Yep. And they were giving me the accounts. I'd get the accounts, I'd type them up, I'd send them back to them. Is this right? Because I want it to be accurate. I don't want to misrepresent them. So then they would say, yeah, that's right, or we'd tweak it a bit. They'd send it to me back, and then they would go in the book. But, you know, between John's, you know, accounts that he's managed to accumulate, myself, and then the stuff we've got online, there must be about 400 different sightings from officers all up and down the country from the 40s up until the present day. And then we had the difficult task of then putting them into a book. Well, as you can imagine, the book would have been as thick as the Doomsday book. It was huge. So what we had to do was we had to cut the book in half, have volume 1 and volume 2, and every chapter is of a different police force. And chapter 1 starts off in alphabetical order, as you would imagine, with Avon and Somerset, you know, then to Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire and Devon and Cornwall, and so on and so forth. And the first book is from Avon and Somerset up until and including the Metropolitan Police. And that'll hopefully be out in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then we'll give it another 6 months, and then we'll release volume 2.
So 6 to 8 weeks, people can expect seeing this book available.
Yeah, and we'll get it out there, and I'm hoping it does reasonably well. So there's never been a UK police, a UK book with just police accumulated sightings before. So this will be the first one that's ever been released. There have been 2 in the United States, as I found out. One called The Book of the Law, and there's another one called Cops and UFOs, or some guy called George Dudding. They're both good books, and although I did feel sometimes that they go off on a tangent, start talking about Roswell or Blue Book or Grudge, and I want to really stick to the topic subject matter of police contact with UFOs. So it's either a police sighting or a sighting that's occurred by the public and the police have investigated it.
Yeah, that's what I'm just going to say. You have included members of the public sightings and the police interaction with that sighting.
Yeah, and the last thing, and it's very clever what John's done. So let's say there's a police sighting. PC Smith has seen whatever, and we'll have the date and time, and then at the end of the account, at the end of the chapter, whatever police force it is, he will then say, he'll cross-reference that with his Great British UFO Archive, and he'll say on the same date as PC Smith saw this saucer, there was an identical sighting from this lady 5 miles away who saw X, Y, Z. It just bolsters the evidence, and it gives the sighting more credibility.
That, and is exactly what I do with truth proof books. Well, I think you know that. And I look for things to pack around the sighting that I'm focusing on, and that is brilliant, because there's probably a link anyway, Roy. Even in different parts of the country, there's probably a link. And I don't mean I get loads and loads, but I get quite a lot of police officers contacting me. And there's a guy from further up country, and we spend. I'm happy if he comes down and he wants to spend time at Bempton. I spend all night. I spend till 4 in the morning with him along cliff tops and things. And he's not. He's a great rough and ready guy, but he's not as open as what you would be. Do you know what I mean? He's got a brother who's in force as well, and his brother thinks it's a load of rubbish. And then when you speak to him, he'll tell you that his brother's had a sighting, similar to what you're just saying now. It's crazy. So
just to put out there, unfortunately, I've never had a sighting.
No.
Ever, but but I guess it's you go and look for a 4-leaf clover in the garden on the grass, you ain't going to find it when you're looking for it. You'll stumble across it one day. So I never have. But so people then say to me, which leads me on to, they'll say, well, if you've never seen it, why do you believe in it? And I always say the same thing back to them, and I always say, because 95% people do believe in this, I'll say, do you believe in God?
Yep. Good point.
And 95% of the populace of the planet believe in a deity of some kind, whether that's
you're going to prove it, aren't you?
Yeah. And of course I will say, well, where's your evidence? And I'll say, well, this book that was written 2,000 years ago. And don't get me wrong, I'm not mocking religion, because religion is a very personal thing to someone, and I would never do that. But at the same time, the evidence there is limited. It's been written by man down the generations. It's been adjusted over the generations. And the evidence that I'm giving it for the existence of God, for me, it's minuscule compared to the evidence that I have got and other ufologists have got to prove the existence of extraterrestrial vehicles that are in our skies. We have photographic evidence, sworn testimonials, video evidence, radar evidence that tracks these craft going at thousands of miles an hour in the blink of an eye. Now that is evidence.
Yeah.
So I believe the evidence. I follow that to wherever it leads me, even if it leads me to an uncomfortable conclusion, which it has done. But like, any police officer investigating something and exercising his due diligence, you investigate it, and wherever it leads you is wherever it leads you. And I can tell you now, from the hundreds, thousands of cases I've read from credible people, politicians, doctors, in fact, credible. I'll probably leave the politicians bit out, really. So, but you know what I mean? Police officers, doctors, scientists, these people are saying what they've seen, and they have everything to lose and nothing to gain
by coming out.
And that is what I have nothing to gain from this myself. I just am to be a bit passionate about the subject. I believe in it, and I like listening to the accounts. And it's my hope one day I'll have a sighting. But I'm 47 now, and I'm still waiting.
So, do you think, I'm probably just echoing what you've said, but by the sheer weight of anecdotal evidence alone, we can't all be wrong. You know, they can't all be lying or fantasizing or embellishing what they've seen. Sometimes multiple witness accounts.
Yeah. Yeah, multiple from people who don't know each other and who've never met, who've seen the same craft from different angles, but from different miles away, who they've had no time to collude and they've just said what they've seen. You know, so it does make it causes me some amusement when you get the, oh, well, there's no evidence. Well, I think there is from the testimonials and the footage and all the rest of it. And I think as we go on, as technology improves, which it does. I mean, look at the iPhones we got now. They say there's more technology in your iPhone than there was in the Challenger space shuttle.
Right.
You know, so as technology improves, maybe we'll see more things. I mean, look, we we launched James Webb not so long back. I've got high hopes for that. It didn't surprise me that NASA put a time delay on it, on the basis I think if anything were to come on, they'd cut the feed.
Yeah, they could. Just what they wanted us to see.
I think we're more open to it now, you know, and I think a lot of these leaks, I think they're allowed to be leaked, but they just say, oh, it's a leak, and then they won't comment on it. But I think they've leaked it on purpose to.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a plan to get us slowly used to it because they know it's coming, rather than deny, and then when you can't deny, it's like a bang, and we're hit, and then there's panic. Get the populace used to it, and then eventually, when we can't hide it any longer, they'll be used to it, and there won't be as much panic. And of course, and then we haven't even touched upon the religious implications of it yet, have we?
No.
You know, and that could be another discussion for a whole 2 hours. You know,
well, the religious implications are massive, aren't they? Because and you know, once again, you touched on it earlier. We're not knocking anybody's religion, anybody's belief system, you know. But people want to get married in church, and as though it's some kind of statement that they're doing it before God, yet. They don't really. A lot of times, these people don't actually believe in any God. They don't even go to church once just to get married in church. It's a strange.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, my own personal opinion is, a lot of people believe in, you know, God, whichever God they believe in, as I think it's an emotional crutch because people are afraid when we pass away what happens to us.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, I better believe just in case. Well, I think if there was a God, he would know you were. So you don't really believe then, do you? You know, and there's a lot to be said for religion and ufology, because of course, if you know, God created man in his own image, what about everything that is outside?
Yeah, good point.
It's a big discussion.
Jumping away from that then for a moment, based on the last 22 years. Has there been any specific locations, and we'll not just stay with UFOs, where officers, colleagues who you've been working with go, do you know, I don't like going in that particular area. There's something that don't quite feel right.
You know, I don't, not in regards to UFOs. It's more sort of, and I know this isn't this type of interview, but, and it's a whole different subject, but usually when officers say that, and it's usually, there's always a shoulder check before they say anything like that to me. They'll be, make sure no one's looking, and then they'll say. But it always involves something to do with like a paranormal thing that they've seen.
Well, that's where I'm going with it, to be honest.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I get Briley Hill Police Station mentioned quite a lot, which is near Dudley, and it's an old building. It's been there since forever. You know, boiler rooms at the bottom, and you know, planking old pipes, and God knows what else. And you get a lot of people say, look, you know, once I saw something, but I can't quite say what it was, but it was definitely there. And I heard such and such when I went through this door. I had a bit of a very strange experience there once on the ground floor. It's an old building, and that's frequently mentioned.
Oh, you're not saying you did then, Roy? You're saying that's
I did at Briley Hill Police Station. I've never had anything to do with UFO, but numerous people mentioned Briley Hill, and I used to think, yeah, okay then. But once again, I have an open mind to do with, you know, the paranormal and all the rest of it. And, you know, is a ghost, or is it just a replay of someone from who's left his energy behind, or is it someone who hasn't moved on and doesn't quite know they're here and they're bouncing in and out of their plane and our plane? And again, I'm open-minded. But yeah, I did have a strange, you know, experience at Briley Hill once, as a lot of officers have, and it's always the older buildings you know, the older police stations. But yeah, quite frequent. You can actually buy books on police and the paranormal and the experiences they've had just in the West Midlands.
So that's not going to be for some future book then that you'd consider writing about that kind of.
No, not really, because for me, there's an ex-police officer. I forget his name. I think his name's Andy Gilbert, actually, and
Okay.
he's written 2 or 3 books about haunted police stations, and he's collated a lot of stories from ex-police officers and serving, and he's done a really fine job, and he's put them into 3 books. So he's done it, you know, well before anybody else, and all I would be doing is regurgitating his stuff and maybe getting a few more stories.
Yeah.
So I think that's I think he's nailed that one, to be honest.
So what about then, Roy? What about the explanations from officialdom that are given for UFO sightings or strange lights in the sky? Have they changed over the years?
There's still a lot of swamp gas going around, Paul.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Well, you know, I mean, so is it because there's no evidence after a UFO sighting? That includes anything I've seen. There's nothing there. You go to.
I think what I've noticed the change with is now, before they would have to come up with a reason, whether it was swamp gas or another one was moonlight reflecting off the water and back up in the sky. You know, as the Earth rotation moved and the Earth was moving, it looked like the crap was moving. What's the other one they used to come out? Bird reflecting light was another one, where I think it was the sun hits the bird and it reflects off and it looks. So they would literally, well, we've got to come up with an explanation. So the nearest one it could be, and they would just say, it's this. Well, now things have changed, because if they don't know, usually what happens is they'll say is, we don't know what that was. All we can say is it's still open ended. They don't try and fudge it with a load of nonsense now, and I've noticed that is the change.
Yeah,
you know,
I've read quite a lot of lifeboat logs and Coast Guard reports over years. You know, official logs, lots of them, and people have heard me going on about these unexplained lights that are seen off the coast. And I don't think it's just resigned to sort of Bempton, Flamborough and Speeton. I think it's all around UK if people open their eyes and spend a bit of time looking. As I'm repeating myself, what I've said on lots of live streams, but you'll get multiple call-outs by lifeboat agencies, multiple lifeboats, Filey, Bridlington, Scarborough, all going out to search for these suspected aircraft or boats in distress. 9-hour searches, nothing found, and it just gets put down as false alarm with good intent. And I've often thought to myself, and not necessarily you as in the police force doing this, but somebody within an official capacity who got the passion, because to me it's a really weak kind of, it's a get out. It's a weak get out, because something's been seen, something's clearly been seen. If they've launched them like those lifeboats and they've had them seeking helicopter up, searching, and
the cost is massive every time you do this.
And the costs are massive, and we just say false alarm with good intent, and it's not right. We need an official body to do an actual. Probably they already know what they're going to find, and they're going to discover or have to say that we did go out searching for a true unknown, but I don't think
we should say that I actually had a few cases with police citing the same thing out at sea, which led me a couple of years back to, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's an anomaly, and it's a natural one called, I think it's either called Fata Morgana or Morgana, right, which is the one where, because there's a sudden increase in temperature changes in like the inversion of the angle of the heat, if you get, say, a ship 10 miles away, it can reflect the ship and it looks like the ship.
It's in the air,
it's in the air. So, you know, people have said, oh, there's a city in the sky or the clouds. And I think on occasions that does come into it.
It does,
but we can't blame it for everything.
No.
But yeah, very interesting, the ones where we don't find any wreckage and there's no report, you know. And if it was a plane or a boat and they didn't turn up, well, guess what? Somebody would have rang up and said that 16 people are missing off a plane or a boat, and that just very rarely happens. So you've got to question what it is. And also, there's a lot to be said, and I've noticed this phrase come out a lot over the last 2 years as well. USOs, unidentified submerged objects, and And I think they call them transmediums now, where we've got some footage of something going from the sky into the water without a reduction in speed. So they can obviously do something in front of the ship to move, to go in, and the water comes over the top. And I know a lot of the Tic Tacs that have been seen under the sea.
Yeah.
Now I just find it quite interesting. So that's why now a lot of the US government, I was on about that group before, and they were forcing the other government agencies to come clean and give their accounts. Well, I think it was the US Air Force are the worst of them for secrecy, because of course they did sign Grudge, Blue Book, and so on and so forth. And what they were doing is, because the definition of before it was Arrow, the anomaly research, it was something different. I can't remember what it was, but it mentioned aerial phenomenon. And what the Navy were doing is going, well, it's in the air, but it's gone in the sea. And they weren't giving the account, going, well, by the definition, it's in the sea, so we didn't disclose. So now that's what's land, sea, and air. But I do think a lot of things out to sea. If it is a UFO or UAP, whatever you want to call it, I do think they've got the ability to hide under the ocean. I think they do. And 3/4 of this planet is covered by water.
Yeah.
So what better way to hide in plain sight but under the water? And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, myself and I do agree with what you're saying there, Roy. And myself and Bob Brown in 2017, I think it was, July 28th. Honestly, I do remember these things. It's weird, isn't it? But we saw 3 lights under the sea, not in the night time, the early evening, and they were lit up under the sea. There's a person at the RSPB, the Nature Reserve, who works there, and they won't come out and openly say that they've seen this. And I know a lot of people at the reserve know that I go down there and I sort of spend a lot of time, but they've seen a red sphere of light descend and enter the sea and told me about it. So it's happening. I mean, I don't think it's just around the area I'm looking at. I think it's all around the UK and the world. And do you think, Lee, I'm just looking at Lee Roscoe's name in chat there. Apologies. Do you think, Roy?
Sorry, you just reminded me of the Dukes of Hazzard now. But go on.
Roscoe, and I, Lee Roscoe, good to see you. And do you think it's all extraterrestrial, or do you think they're already here? They've got to be here.
I think they're here because, look, for me, there are 2 types. I think you've got your typical, what everybody thought in the 40s and 50s and 60s, where they're coming from somewhere incredibly far away, hundreds of thousands, millions of light years. And there's obviously some way that they are bending space and time to get here, whether that's a wormhole or whatever. Then I think the other type is probably, and I would never have said this 2-3 years ago, but my research has led me there, is I actually genuinely believe you've got now is interdimensional entities, that maybe they're in the same plane of existence, but they're operating at a different vibration to us. And they've got the technology in wherever they are to open that up and come through. Yeah. And both, that's just my opinion. I would imagine both types are aware of each other. But once they get here, it might be a bit of a journey to get back, or lots of power. So while you're here, how do we stay on this planet and monitor these silly people that argue over oil every 10 minutes and blow each other up? How do we monitor them without having to go back and, well, we'll use the oceans of that planet and we'll just hide there or whatever. There's even been reports of them going into volcanoes in Brazil and some really quite startling footage. So I think they're here. They come from elsewhere, but I think they're here, and I don't know whether, I don't know what the purpose is. Maybe the monitor us, like the monitor us from, we would monitor someone in a zoo or a tribe in the jungle or whatnot. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I've even got divers on rigs reporting seeing strange lights. There's one even reported seeing what he said was an alien being under the sea. So that's somewhere I don't mean I want to go. Pardon the pun. That's something I really want to be looking into next. The underwater reports, people on the oil rigs, because I think there's a wealth of information there, and I find it's absolutely fascinating. It seems wherever you go in this world, there's somebody got something to report. Even people of religion are reporting seeing things that don't conform to what they would believe. But excuse my rambling. We'll see if Les has got any questions, unless you've got anything to say to that. Roy?
No, I completely
No.
agree with you.
We'll go with Les then. Yeah, and it's Brian Allen, who's the editor of Phenomena magazine, who works closely with Steve Meara. He's a wealth of knowledge on Rosslyn Chapel, and he's got some connections up there. I hope you don't mind me saying that. And we've spoken about it, and yeah, I would love to look into it more. There were nobody more surprised than me when a good friend of mine, Andrew, who is a bit of an expert on family trees, looked into the family tree. If people don't know what we're on about here, and did a bit of history on me and found out that my 17th direct grandfather was William St. Clair, the guy who's responsible for Rosslyn Chapel, which it blew me away, to be honest with you. And I don't know what it means, people. It's not supposed to be anything supernatural, paranormal, or anything of that type, but interesting nevertheless. So yeah, I would love to look into it more, and I'm sure we will in the future. Thank you. Yeah. Go on then. Yeah, just keep me gone. So Les has got an issue with his mic, people. So I'm going to relay the question. I'm sure that Sky's already posted some of these up in the chat, but right, go on, Les. Right. So the question was Adam Sander, question for Roy. Who was Roy's biggest inspiration whilst working in the UFO field?
You know, I'd say that would probably be friends of mine at school. No one famous. There were a couple of people at school who, from when I was a young age, you're talking like 11 or 12, and we would talk about the subject quite often. You know, in between rock music and 80s films, we'd get onto the subject of UFOs, and it would be, what about this incident? Well, what about that? Well, what about this book? There's a book. I remember, a good friend of mine from school, a guy called Mark Chapman, and he had a book, Top Secret by Timothy Good, and he borrowed it me, and I read it, and I've got a copy of it on the shelf behind me as well, and I'd say, well, what about this book? And there was a couple at school, and I guess it was the inspiration of my friends, and I think we all inspired each other, and you would then you would want to know more to almost remain in the UFO clique. Do you know what I mean? But it was good natured. So 3 good friends of mine, like I say, Mark Chapman, Mark Bryce, great guy, and a guy called Dave Moore, and we're always talking about the same thing. And I would suggest that, they more so than anybody famous.
Yeah.
Because I could mention all the films and the actors, but they're just acting. They're probably in reality don't have a feel or a passion for it. I don't know.
The people that touched a chord with you were close friends. Yeah. So we'll see if we can get another question out of Les. If you can hear Les's microphone, people.
I'm back on now, guys. Everybody should hear me, yeah. And thanks for filling in there, Paul. MKMD Exploration and Paranormal is asking, and I know you've touched on this earlier, Roy, has Roy ever come across any cases whilst in the police that's sightings, abductions, or even paranormal?
UFOs, like I say, I've never had a sighting. I have, in the course of my investigations, managed to speak to, I can't get into too much detail, but I got a phone call from an officer saying that something had happened. And the police helicopter and his force flew up to investigate it, and these objects were flying around it. And of course, I liaised with my counterpart in that force. And man, he barefaced told me fibs and said, no, it never happened, and the helicopter was never in the sky. So I then made some other inquiries and I found out that it was up and these things were there. So I guess that's probably the latest one I've had. He probably felt awkward. He didn't know what to say. Paranormal. You know, I had a weird thing happen to me, like I alluded to at Briley Hills Police Station. I didn't see anything. I heard something. So I'd heard stories about, you know, that there's like the ground floor and it's right at the. You got to picture the police station, about 4 floors, very small corridors, windy staircases and whatnot, 100 years old. So it was probably about 3 a.m, and I was on. There's like we used to call it the V&I suite. It's vulnerable suite where we'd sit and people would take statements. Well, of course, at 2 a.m, the CID, you know, the colouring in departments, they're not on duty. You know, they're in the beds. So, you know, you'd have force response to be up, and I was the inspector of force response, and I was making some notes in this room, and I was in there for about an hour. I got up, and I didn't realise I'd left my phone on the sofa. So at about 5 a.m, I go back down and as I'm walking down this corridor, I could hear these 2 kids laughing, and the first thing I thought was, someone's coming early from the public protection unit. And they're in the same room I've just been writing my notes. And I'm going to walk in there to pick up my phone. And they're going to think I was sleeping and getting my head down on a night shift on the settee, which, of course, I wasn't. Right? So as I opened the door, and I'm telling you now, those kids, they were in that room. As I opened the door to come up with my excuses, the noise stopped and there was nobody in that room. And you know when you feel like just cold, you know, not afraid, just cold. I'm like, did that just happen? But I knew it did. So I remember getting my phone and thinking, is somehow my phone on or something? It wasn't. And then I went home a couple of hours later, and it was pondering. It was on my mind all night, and I was on the next night shift. And I thought, I know what it is. There'll be a grate in the wall, and it will be someone outside, and the noise has travelled through the grates of the vents. So I swipe my card, get in the station, I go straight to that room, I open it, and there was no vents in there from the outside, no air vents, nothing. And he just kind of reconfirmed what I knew, which is really, do you know what? I don't know what it was. I don't know whether it was an echo of the past, or I have no idea. All I can say is that it happened. I didn't see anything. I just heard something. So that was my paranormal, spooky Briley Hill Police Station story.
There's a few thoughts passing through my mind when you're telling us that, Roy, and it almost as an awareness. You open door and it stops. So would an echo from the past do that? I mean, I know we don't know. So, but it's implying there's an intelligence, unless it's a change in air pressure that just stops it.
Or a change in the energy as you come into the room. I mean, Paul, there's so many things we don't know. We don't. I mean, we go back 300 years, and we were burning people at the stake because we believed that, you know, if people said that we revolve around the sun and the sun doesn't revolve, we burn them at the stake. We've come a long way since then in 300 years. Who's to say in another 300 years what we've discovered? I mean, at the moment, we can measure people's aura with certain cameras, and we can see the energy coming off them. We know that when people pass at the moment, there's a great release of energy into the brain. Whether that's to make people more comfortable when they pass, who knows? But maybe we'll have the answers, or at least some of the answers to the questions, you know, in a couple of 200 or 300 years. I haven't got the answer to what happened, but you make a good point. If it wouldn't be intelligent enough to stop, would it? It's just a replay.
Fascinating, that, absolutely. Yeah. Les, fire another question, please.
Yes, and welcome everybody to tonight's live stream, by the way. I know you missed my voice earlier on, but the audio should be now rectified. And I'm looking through the questions, and I've got a question from Silver Wave. And Silver Wave is asking, do Paul and Roy think the UK has its own Area 51?
Paul will answer it first, and I don't know whether Roy even wants to answer it, but I'll answer it in saying I would think that most military installations are completely out of bounds and unaccessible to general public, and there'll be certain sensitive things happening there. As for an Area 51, there'll be people in chat who'll tell me they have, or there is. I don't know. That's my answer. I really don't know. I've heard lots of things. I've heard lots and lots of things. I'm sorry I wouldn't let Roy go there, but I've heard lots of things. I spoke to a lady who worked at RAF Staxton Wold who told me that she worked in level 7, and there were many more levels below it, which is like 11 miles from where I'm sat now. 500 foot above sea level. It's conceivable that, mind you, you would just go down. It could be at ground level and they'd just go down. But is there a level 7? Is there many more levels below it? I don't know. I'm only going on what people have told me. She weren't fantasizing or trying to tell me something incredible. She didn't even know or interested in the subject of UFOs. Just that I got working as a joiner probably 12, 15 years ago in somebody's house, and they used to work there. Her husband was still serving. He was a fast jet pilot. So there you go. I don't know. Is there an Area 51? What's your views, Roy? Or a similar area?
So Area 51. So, I mean, I think Area 51 in itself, I think now it's a smokescreen because it's so famous now. I think if they did have anything UFO there, they wouldn't store it there. It would be somewhere else, and they want you looking at Area 51, so you don't look elsewhere. So it's convenient for them. So I think they have got an Area 51, but it'll be wherever it is, somewhere else now. As for do we have one in the UK? I would suggest we're one of the most powerful nations in the world, one of the most richest. The government, for all the faults, they're not daft. So I would suggest that we have probably got an equivalent. Whether we've got any craft like I think the Americans have, I don't know. But I would suggest we've got, if we do have an Area 51, it's going to be at probably a government or a military installation somewhere beyond, not to barbed wire, where there's guards, and it'll be where we develop our top secret aircraft. So if they are seen, it will be blamed on, well, it's top secret aircraft. And what better way to hide in plain sight? I would suggest that we probably have, yeah. But we'll never know what it's called or where it is.
This is a big jump from Area 51, but do you know a place up north, further up the country past Whitby, there's a potash mine. People will be thinking, where's he going with this? Obviously, fertilizer, they're digging out potash. But deep below ground, there's a massive secret. Well, not secret, because I'm talking about it. There's a massive facility called Deep Black, where they're doing lots of experiments and scientific experiments as an offshot from the potash mine. And it's nothing to do with the potash. This is all experimental stuff that's happening. So, I mean, that's not Area 51, but people will be thinking, well, he's talking a load of rubbish. Do a little bit of Googling, people, a little bit of research. It's there. I actually know people who work at the Baldby potash mine. That's there. This secret facility is there.
I have no doubt. There's a few. They've got. I mean, every government has got a right to, in the interest of national security, to develop stuff for the betterment of the nation and to protect it with better aircraft and such. So there will be somewhere where these things are tested, or we've got our top secret stuff for sure.
Are we more questions, Les, or are we moving on to Haunted Skies?
Can I just add to that? Lisa Odder's just added, Donanoke in Lincolnshire is often called Area 52.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. I didn't know that.
Okay. I've got another question. Right then, Nickname is asking, I can get rid of that. Nickname is asking, is there a critical incident protocol that you are aware of in such incidents of mass sighting, crashes, etc., or would it go to the armed forces? Would you deal with it, or would it be passed on to armed forces?
Well, if we dealt with it, it would be whisked away by the military. I would suggest if the police become involved, it would be road closures and not let anybody in, not let anyone out, and you have various zones. You would have a hot, a warm, and a cold zone, and we would probably as the police, we'd be, I guess, a cordon around the hot zone, letting the military in. They would do what they do, tell us it was a chemical spill or something, do what they've got to do. We would close the road, we'd open the roads and we'd be gone. But I don't think we would actually get like constables looking at a craft or anything. They don't want any witnesses. They'd want us back.
Yeah.
So I don't think we get involved in retrieving or anything like that.
No. Okay. Well,
Oh, can I just jump in there? Can we do a little bit of housekeeping here? And Paul, if you want to advertise where people can buy your books and your website.
yeah, the website's truthproof.uk. So anybody who wants to send us your own UFO reports, we want first-hand accounts, please, and we'll put them on the website, or Don Lodge will, because Don puts most of the stuff on, well, all of the stuff on the website for me. I fire it at Don, and that's where it goes. I'm very lucky to have Don helping me with that. And the books are available in paperback on truthproof.uk. And if you want the Kindles, obviously they're on Amazon. And yeah, that's about where I'm at with it. And I don't know whether I don't know whether Roy wants to say anything about John Hanson's Haunted Skies books. And
So John, I'm happy to do so. So they're literally, I think it's from the 40s onwards, and he's collated probably thousands of sightings, and they're all in year order. So it'll be 1940 January, 1940 February, and of course the book would be this big, wouldn't it? So of course
huge books,
Haunted Skies 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. I do have some. You can see, I think I've got about 4 on the shelf. But if you do, basically they're all different kind of types, but they're really good. They're pretty thick. Colour or black and white, you choose whichever one you want. Obviously it's going to be more expensive for the colour and lesser so for the black and white, but they are good books. They're well put together, and I just like how he does it in chronological date order. So if anyone wants a really good comprehensive read of how ufology's grown and the reports have got better, because you can see from the 40s they're not as good, 50s not, and then they get better and better and more detailed, because we've advanced with technology and people started to get cameras, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, you go back 30 years, no iPhones, 20 years, no, but now there's iPhones, there's footage everywhere, isn't it? And that's why I think that it won't be able to be kept quiet for another 10 or 15 years. I think it's something else. But yeah, but Haunted Skies books by John Hanson, they're very good, mate.
So just before we leave Haunted Skies books, because we're going to hear a little bit about some of the cases in Haunted Skies, you know, the police UFO sightings.
Yeah.
Where are people going to be able to find that book in 6 to 8 weeks' time?
So I'm in talks with John. So my goal is going to be Amazon, because that's the big marketplace, isn't it? So it's going to be Amazon, and you know, I'm sure if I were to tell you where it would be, it'd be Amazon. A few other places, I'm sure you could put it out there for us. But the goal is Amazon.
Well, what we'll say now, and obviously we're not Amazon, we're just like an ant, but I'm sure Don will not mind that. We'll also put that book on Truth Proof website, and as long as you've got a link to it, you'll be able to fire the books out when there's a sale.
Oh, that would be fantastic. That would really help. So,
well, we don't want anything from it. You know, we do that with a few people, and I'm quite happy to do it, and it'll be a great book. So yeah, we'd love to do it. So yeah, thank you.
No, thank you, mate. That'd be brilliant. Yeah.
All right. I'll ask a few questions later on, guys, and I'll let you roll with it.
Yeah. Well, let's jump to some of the sightings in the Haunted Skies book, if you want to, Roy. I think these listeners would love to hear about them.
Okay. So I mean, I knew the question to come up, obviously, because it's standard. So you have to forgive me. I have jotted down a bit because
no, it's all good. I've got
I'll probably forget.
So we're no different. It's all good.
Okay, so let me go on about the first one. So yeah, I'm going to mention. I'll mention a couple. I won't, drag them out, but I'll mention them. So and rattle through them. But a guy, he contacted me as a result of my NARPO plea for people to get hold of me. A guy called ex-Inspector David O'Flanagan, lovely guy. Now his sighting was in the late 1960s, so some time back now, and he's on the A19 travelling towards the A1, and he's with a colleague. And he's seeing above a cornfield and I'm going to read exactly how he's described it. And there is a reason I'm going to read it, because I've come across several of this exact description. What he said is this. I saw a large spinning glowing object similar in appearance to 2 double-decker buses strapped together but not double-decker buses, obviously. Just
No,
because
no, but he's giving that
on fire
knowledge.
and spinning around one another, almost if they're in a sphere. So the sphere's there, but the objects are in, you know,
Yeah.
rattling around. So, of course, it's frightened them because they had no idea what it was. Huge thing, just above the cornfield as they come over this hill. So they have literally exited stage left, put the foot down, and they have gone. Well, this thing's chased them. And what the amazing thing about this account is that as they've just turned the corner, it's just clipped the top of the police car. So they've gone back to the police station and they've reported this to their inspectors. Now, at the time, he was a constable. He'd not been in long. So he's reported it to the inspector who said, listen, go away and come back and tell me how you've really damaged the police car. You can imagine, can't you?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I would be saying that now, and I'm interested in this. I'll be like, mate, you've been watching that podcast and you've come up with a load of baloney because you think I'm going to swallow that. So he sent him out, but he was adamant. And when they examined the top of the police car, what they've got on there is it's hit them. Just for anyone who knows the location, there's a hill brow on a place called Cedar Burn. It doesn't mean anything to me, but somebody on there might know where it is. And it skimmed off the top of the police car, and it's took off in line with the A1. This object, and then the inspection of the roof of the patrol car, it's got scorch and burn marks, and the rubber mouldings have melted on top of the police car. They were then told as well to go away and sleep it off, and they hadn't been drinking. So they've gone home. Now, it doesn't end there. So bear in mind, everyone's said the nuts. Don't believe them. Well, what happens the next day? He gets a knock at the door. And who is it but the RAF? And he gets taken in a car to, and I've never heard of it either, but it's RAF Boulmer, Boulemer. So he's taken in the car and he gets all these questions. They're asked of him. And the one person was in RAF uniform. He believes, I think their rank's on the sleeve, isn't it here?
Okay.
I'm not quite sure. Or in fact, it might be up there. I can't remember. I was Army, it's on the arms. But anyway, he thinks it was a squadron leader. And he just said there was another guy with him in a dark suit who just sat in the corner writing all the notes, but not saying anything. And then at the end of that, he was taken back and dumped off at his house. And he was told not to tell no one he'd been spoken to. So, of course, the next day he did the opposite, and he told his friend who he was with, and he said, you're not going to believe this. I was told the same thing, and I had the same thing. So they were both taken. So they knew something was up in the sky.
Yeah.
The RAF did. But why else would you be interested unless you knew?
Yeah, but where's the connection, Roy, from his superiors in the force, the police force, saying, go away and sleep it off, or tell us how you really damaged the car, to actually the RAF connecting, knocking on his
so
door.
what they've done is, a little bit missed out, was that they then rang the local, the airports, the nearest ones, to say, have you had anything on radar?
Right.
No. So I imagine that it was probably a fib.
Yeah.
And then they've rang and said, oh, 2 police officers have seen this. And then the police have probably, the RAF, probably someone high up has probably contacted maybe some high-ranking officer and said, look, who are these people? And well, this is this, and this is where they live. And they've turned up at their house. I'm just putting 2 and 2 together, but I think that's a pretty fair estimate of what happened.
I'm pro your sighting, but everything's so unbelievable. It's kind of believable. We've got 2 objects the size of, did you say double-decker buses spinning like
2 double-decker buses, yeah.
Above a cornfield.
Yeah.
No cornfield on fire. Did you say cornfield?
It was above a cornfield, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know? And the first thing that strikes me is that if these people wanted to spin a yarn, these officers, they wouldn't say above a cornfield, would they?
No.
Otherwise, it's a bit of shallow thinking, well, bloody hell, we're going to have a crop fire here, kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's another one very similar with the double-decker bus thing, and I've come across a few of these. So every time I hear one, I think, not the same thing again. And this was a guy called, he's an ex-DC, Adrian Shaw, lives abroad now, and unfortunately, he can only say between 2005 and 2010, but he went to a very posh golf club, which is on Warwickshire, because he was a member of Warwickshire Police, and he went there to deal with another unrelated matter. And while he was there, one of the managerial staff came up to him and said, look, he was a bit flustered. He said, what's the matter? He said, 2 of the security officers last night saw a UFO, and it's on CCTV. So he was like, he kind of rolled his eyes. That's what he said to me. He said, roll my eyes. But he was a CCTV expert, this DC, and he'd done some courses. So he goes and looks at this CCTV, and he said he saw these 3 lights come down from the sky and then merge into one big sphere, but the camera was black and white, so he couldn't tell what colour it was.
No.
And there was a bit of a time lapse. You know the old cameras where you get like, it records, doesn't record, so you've almost got stop, start, stop, that type of thing. So this thing's there, and then suddenly this golf buggy comes into view, and this thing starts to go off, and the golf buggy's kind of going after it. And he said it was like, before the golf buggy there, it was clearly a massive sphere hovering in the sky, right? And it wasn't normal, it wasn't a laser or nothing. And he said it freaked the manager out, and him watching it, he was like, oh, is that real? You know? So it's on his mind, and he can't stop thinking about it. So eventually he tells me about it. And bearing in mind, we're in 2022 now, and this was 2005 to 2010. I thought, well, the Belfry is a very posh golf club. Sometimes people work at these locations for 30 years, don't they? 40 years.
Job for life kind of thing, yeah.
So I visited there in the day to have a cup of coffee to make sure everybody was safe, you see. And whilst I was there, I made some inquiries. Amazing coincidence, isn't it? So, and I made an inquiry with one of the managers, and as soon as I started talking, he wanted to get off the subject, Paul. And I've interviewed lots of people, and I deal with people who don't tell me the truth quite often.
Yeah.
And he was a lovely bloke, but he clearly felt uneasy. And I think he didn't want the stigma at the Belfry Golf Club. So he then said, oh, I know what you're on about. It was a fireworks display, and people thought it was a UFO. It was just misdiagnosed. I said, okay. And he tried to steer me off it, and I thought, I am going to let you steer me off it, and I'll come back when you're not here. So I left it a couple of weeks, and I went back 2 weeks later, and lo and behold, I started speaking to security, and I said, has anybody been working here like 20 years, you know? And he said, oh, this guy said, there's a guy working there, security, he has. And I started to speak to this guy, and he, nice enough guy, and I said, look, I'm really here because about this UFO incident. And he said, that was my son, and he works here. He's in the net. So he gets his son in, and I had this amazing conversation. He said, yeah, he remembers the DC, and he told me what happened. He said he didn't see the 3 lights come down to make one sphere, because as they've come over the hill, he said it was there. And how do you think he described it? 2 double-decker buses, like together, going round. So it shot off, and he's gone after it, and it's gone out of frame. What they don't know, the 2 security officers, is about 2 minutes later, when they're not on camera, it come back. Because the police officer saw it. So you've got 2 different vantage points, albeit one CCTV and one was live and in the flesh. So there's loads of these. I just thought it was worth mentioning because they're so similar. The description.
These are fascinating, and these are what.
There's loads. I mean, I've written down 9 here. I could go on for it. I'll go on until you tell me to shut up. To be honest.
Well, no. This is good. I'm curious. At the beginning of when you started talking about that, Roy, you mentioned a golf buggy following it. Did you?
Yeah. Yeah, I did, because they were in a golf buggy because the security doing the 90 rounds, you see.
Yeah, right.
As it shot off, they've gone to try and catch it up.
Right, because we were doing the CCTV and then we can see the golf buggy. I didn't realise.
Oh, sorry, I was that excited. I forgot to fill in the really key point. So the golf buggy's come over the rise of the hill with the 2 security guys in it. This thing has then gone off at like a 45-degree angle, and the golf cart's gone after it. At whatever speed a golf cart can do, I don't know, 3 miles an hour. But at least the effort was there. So it's well gone off, and the cart's gone after it. And as the cart's probably somewhere looking for it elsewhere, it's come back, and it's been caught on the camera.
So during research into book and all research before book, because obviously we can see that you've got this massive interest, have you found certain locations that are producing more unexplained activity than others?
You know what, mate? I have. I'll tell you where's a big place. West Yorkshire, or just Yorkshire in general. And I find...
well, you know, we're Yorkshire. That's where we are.
Yeah, I find that is from I've had more reports from officers in West Yorkshire, South and North Yorkshire than anywhere else in the country. I don't know whether it's because it's an open area and they can see more and there's a lot less light pollution, as they say. But some proper cracking stories that neck of the woods. So that for me was a police visual UFO hotspot.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah. Just obviously we can do a few more of these reports, and that's what I want to. I want you to get through all 9, but and you might not be able to answer this, but any member of public listening to this or speaks to you personally and wants to put in a freedom of information request asking about UFOs in particular, we'll stick with UFOs. How would they word it? How would best word it to get a result? If something was seen, and it doesn't have to be from outer space, just something unusual has been seen.
How best to word it? I mean, the more detail you request, the more likely they are to write back to say that research would make West Mids Police, West Yorkshire Police, whatever police force, too much time, and they'll knock you back there and then. So I would say, less is more.
Yeah.
So if you want to know about from this year to that year, 10 years, I'd say put in a freedom of information request from, 90 to 91. I'd then do 91 to 92, or get one. If there was 4 or 5 of you interested, say, right, you put it in for this year, I'll do this year, you know what I mean? So you split it up, and then the chances of being refused were a lot less.
Yeah, okay.
Can you tell me what UFO site you've had between this date to this date? And just keep it as simple as that.
Yeah.
And usually 9 times out of 10, if it's like that, because then they're not writing giving you the full reports, they'll just say January 10th, such and such, UFO reported by such and such, or craft reported such and such, and they'll just give you the dates and a very brief little resume. But that's at least that's something to hook onto and get your teeth into and to start investigating.
Off topic a little bit here, Roy, so don't go there if you don't want to. But what about poltergeist type activity? Have you been to any properties where they've said things are moving about? Or
I've never seen anything like that. The only spooky thing I ever had was the one at Riley Hill. But
okay.
I've had colleagues that have seen, I've seen some spooky stuff and there's some spooky stuff in the books I read, but I just heard the noise.
No, that's perfect answer. You're not trying to give me one that doesn't exist. So
no.
Let's hear another account from Haunted Skies, please.
Okay, so this one I found quite interesting because and you can look at this online, right? So if South Wales police helicopter, he filmed a UFO sphere above the Bristol Channel in 2006. So if you go onto Google now, you will see that, and you'll see the photographs of what was taken. But here's the key thing about this: when the pilot and the navigator and the camera operator looked out the window, there was nothing there, and only because the camera operator was messing about with the infrared camera. So it reminds me a bit like the film The Predator.
Yeah.
When he can see with certain modes on his arm.
Yeah.
And certain modes. So you could see it in infrared, but you couldn't see it with the naked eye or on the normal camera. And the picture's quite good. And I found it quite fascinating because that picture of that unidentified flying object, whatever it is, and that was in 2016, I came across a case, and a guy emailed me he's an ex-PC called Nick Barman, and he's he was a Hampshire police officer, and in 2009, so 7 years before, 30 years this guy served, as honest as the day is long, he was on holiday in Malta. And someone has said, there's a UFO. There's a UFO near the beach. And he's like, yeah, okay then. But, curiosity gets the better of him. So he goes and has a look. Well, the next thing he finds is he's running back in the hotel. Give me the camera, because it's there, isn't it? So he gets this camera and he starts taking some pictures. And he's switched on enough to then run further down the beach. And rather than take all zoomed in photographs of this thing,
you get some reference points
back. And he's done it with a heathland and the beach, so you can really get a proportion of how big this thing is. It's not overly big, but that craft, I am telling you, from looking at the Bristol Police helicopter footage to what he took a picture of, that craft is identical.
Really?
Right? And I have seen pictures of the same craft taken from the 60s and 70s, and again, it is identical. So these things have been around for a long time. So this is why I think a lot of these aren't man-made or vehicles being tested, because, well, we didn't have the technology in the 60s.
And it's not changed.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying it's exactly the same. I'm saying it's the same type of craft.
Mm.
You know, like, you know, if you saw a jet one day, you wouldn't say it was the same if you saw it a week later. It could be a different jet, couldn't it? And I think it's interesting because I think that there are different craft for different things. I think some are probes, like the little spheres. I don't know what the Tic Tacs are. Are they like solo crew thing? We don't know. And the bigger craft, maybe they've got, shall we just say, non-human entities on it. I don't know how best to explain it, but I just thought it was worth mentioning about. So sometimes it's almost like the cloak from Vision. It's like some sort of Klingon battle cruiser. Do you understand? And then other times it's like they choose to let you see them.
Yeah, you make a good point.
It's strange.
And do you know, obviously a plane from 1940s, excuse me, ain't going to look like a plane from 2022. You know, the aircraft's vastly different. Yet the phenomena that we're observing, particularly when I bang on about these light forms, hasn't changed from the first documented lifeboat and Coast Guard reports of unexplained spheres of light from then to present day. So I don't think we're dealing with anything that's man-made in that respect. Do you know what I'm saying? And then we've got the opposite of what you've just said, because you, with one of our accounts from Wolflands, which doesn't involve UFOs, but there's a lady on cliff tops with her friend Lee, and they can see this what they perceive as a strange creature sat on edge of the cliff. And they've got an infrared camera, and they can't see it with the infrared camera, but they can see it with the naked eye. And do you know what I mean? It's really odd. And they know it was there. It made an audible noise. Lee heard a growl and saw this thing lower down and sort of slink up the cliff, not up the cliff. People don't think we're going vertical, along the cliff top. It's on an incline. So much of what we're talking about sort of contradicts the other. And I don't think it's trickery. I think there's a lot of things at play here, to be honest with you.
So do I.
So do we have more reports? We'll get some questions off Les, I'm sure, shortly. But
yes, I'll give you a couple more until you tell me to stop.
No.
And I was looking down earlier, not to be rude. It was because when I give this, rather than write a load of stuff out.
Well, you're looking down. That's not a problem. So, it's good.
So right. So this one's a guy called PC Jonathan Lake, and he contacted me, and he's very specific with this date, July 10th, 1995, South Yorkshire Police. Funnily enough. So for anyone who's up in that neck of the woods, so parked in the junction of Windmill Avenue, looking down Hurst Gate, which is another road. It's an extremely steep road. So he said it reminded me kind of akin to streets of San Francisco, you know, like really steep streets. And they were there because of a burglary strike. And this one I wanted to read out because this isn't a craft. This is like an anomaly in the sky, and you'll see where I'm going to go with this.
Yeah.
So he's looked up and he said, it was this point I noticed something up above me in the sky that I just can't explain. I have no idea how long it had been there. I can only describe what I saw as a black mass that appeared solid, but with large spheres of light all around it. And I know it was solid as I couldn't see any stars through it, and they were everywhere else in the sky. Now, he was looking at this while sat in a police car with a colleague, okay? So he's seen it, but I remember him saying to me when I spoke to him, he could see all the stars in the sky, then he's had a conversation, and then he's looked back, and then a couple of minutes later, he's looked, and you could see all the stars around it, but then this perfect sphere was there, and there were no stars. Does that explain it better with these spheres going around? Like it was a hole in the sky. And he just said it was a very clear night. It was a huge object. It was about 200 meters. It was about 200 meters above the car, and he could kind of see it from the windscreen in its entirety. So I guess it was just in front as opposed to just directly above.
Yeah.
And he's turned to his colleague to say, "Look at that." And his colleague's in the back of his seat looking up at it, clearly frightened.
Yeah.
And he's then said, "Can you see it?" And he said, "I can see it, mate. I can see it." And then they look at each other and go, "What we're going to do?" And when they look back, it's gone. So they quickly open the doors, get out to look, and it's not in the sky. So it would not, in his words, have had time to have moved from above the sky anywhere 360 out of his sphere of vision, unless it was supersonic speed. So so I know it's not a craft, but then you start thinking, well, what was that? Is that a doorway opening for someone to come through? I don't know what it is, but I just thought it was such.
Or is there some awareness there? Once again, just like when you opened that door and the voices, the children's voices stopped, they turn away from it and it's gone. Do you know, at Hummonby in 1998, before this thing landed on the industrial unit, a few nights before, three men saw three giant triangular objects moving through the sky from the sea, which would be about 4 miles. They're in Hummonby, 4 miles inland, 3 to 4 miles. And they're watching and mesmerized. They can see these things blacking out the stars as they're approaching. And they just thought that they were going to get a massive, better view of them as they passed overhead. And they just disappeared. They just switched off.
Yeah.
Now, suddenly they could see stars and everything again. It's crazy. It's almost as though there is an awareness to these things. I'm sure there is in many instances. But you talked about this black mass, and I've got a report. I can't remember date. Someone tells me it's 2009 from a place called Oliver's Mount in Scarborough, which is highest point around. It's about 500 foot above sea level, in line with Stakston Wold, which we talked about earlier, which will be about from Oliver's Mount 6 miles away. And there's somebody, a courting couple, looking up at the mount, looking up at Oliver's Mount, and they can see a black mass with what they call fairy lights all the way around it, twinkling all the way around it. And it were darker than the sky. It were darker than everything else, this black thing. And I sort of thought of that when you were speaking, about this.
I wasn't aware of that one, so that'd be quite good to get off you.
Yeah.
I could actually stick that after the story.
It's a comparison, isn't it? Yeah,
for sure. And some good collaboration there.
And I don't know whether you're talking about West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, and anybody listening to this, I'm after a sighting that I think might be an archive. I thought it would be at Mexborough Library, but apparently their microfilm archive is at Conisbrough, which will be 2 or 3 miles away. And I'm looking for the Mexborough Power Station UFO. I don't know if you've come across that, Roy. I think it's 1967, and it's a UFO that's seen, and it's featured, I think, in South Yorkshire Times, close to the cooling towers of Mexborough Power Station.
Yeah, so I know the site you're on about, and I've got about 4 Mexborough ones, but I don't know whether I've got details. I bet John has, and that's probably
he hasn't. I've tried John, and we know it exists because the guy who sent John a lot of clippings years ago, he just doesn't have it himself anymore. So I'm going to have to go down there. And the reason it's important to me is when I wrote the book Night People about my own experiences, the book opens for me with my dad waking me up. I'm assuming it's early evening. I'm only a little boy, 59 now. I'm assuming I would have been about 5 or 6. And he shows me from back bedroom window, looking over at the fields, the marshes and everything else, and the town of Mexborough with the power station on my right-hand side, a sphere of light about 3/4 of the way up the cooling tower, which then travels along the rooftops of Mexborough. Can't prove it, never will be able to, but I'm sure that will give me a date for in my own mind, from when my dad showed me that. So that's why I want it.
I mean,
you've not got the sighting, but somebody listening to this might, and you never know.
You never know. Okay, let's have a look. Oh yeah, this is a good one. So this guy contacted me, funny enough, only last week. So a guy called Nick Spinks, 33 years he served in the police. All in the Met Police, and for the last, I think, 15, he was RASP, which is kind of your protection of dignitaries and ministers and so on and so forth.
Are we using actual names? Have you changed any names in these?
No, these are all the genuine names of the people. So,
excellent.
And that's the thing. For every time I speak to them, I always ask, "Are you happy to go public?" Not all of them have. Some of them have said they want to be anonymous, and I've got to respect that. And there's a code within the police, and you would never break it. But all these are genuine names with genuine people who've agreed to go public and be in the book.
Yeah.
So Nick Spinks is Nick Spinks, 33 years in the Met, 15 years working on sort of armed protection within the Met, looking after MPs, and he has said basically this occurred in the late 80s, early 90s. 88, between 88 and 92, I guess. And sometimes I could throttle some of them because if you'd written down the date, it would have been much better because we could have cross-referenced things. But at the time, it wasn't done for whatever reason. Now, this officer, this was in, I think it was 2003, and he is on his motorcycle, which is why I mentioned this. He's on his motorbike, he's doing about 50 miles an hour, it's 10:30, he's just finished a late shift, and it's trees either side of the road. And at the periphery of his vision on the near side, that's on the left side, he's overtaken by what he can only describe as a massive saucer-shaped craft, like your proper, something you'd see in a 50s film. And he said it overtook him. It was probably about 300 or 400 feet up in the sky, and about 100 meters from him. So however you work out the maths for that, 100 feet away and then 300 or 400 feet up. But it was above the trees, and he had a really good look at this thing, and he could see it. And because it was overtaking him, brilliant view. But he could only kind of see the underside of it. He said it was definitely a saucer, about 70 miles an hour. And he said, what he can tell me is, it wasn't a hot air balloon, it wasn't a blimp, it was nothing like that. And this guy, well worth mentioning, since he's been 12 years old, he has been flying gliders. And he has got a qualification in unpowered flight. So this guy knows what he's talking about. And he said to me, this craft, because of its size and obvious weight, it was massive. It had no business hanging in the sky. It should have smashed into the ground, but it didn't. Now, he's viewed this for about, I'd say, 5 or 6 seconds. And as the roads paralleled away, it's took him away from the craft. But he's having none of it because he wants to see it. So he takes the next left turn to try and see more of this. And he loses sight of it, stops the bike. He looks between two houses, can't see it. So he turns back round, comes back to the junction. He turns left on the road he was supposed to be on. And he thinks, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to hightail it on my bike as quick as I can go to the local rugby club 2 miles away. Because if I park my bike and run into the middle of that pitch, I've got complete 360 observation. And that's what he does. Bike's down there. He even said he turned his light off because, and he said, he knows this is going to sound nuts, but he was uncomfortable with looking at something with beings on that he thought might be on there, and then knowing he's looking and looking back at him. And he said, so he turned his bike light off, and he said to me, Roy, I know that sounds crazy. He went, but I'd already witnessed crazy. He went, but again, he didn't see it at the rugby club. So he gets back on his bike, composes himself, goes home, and he's that nervous. He can't put his key in the front door. So he has to ring the doorbell and his wife lets him in, and he tells his wife and he tells his best friend, but he wouldn't tell anyone else because, being a police officer, he was scared of the ridicule he would get. And he only tells me now because I've appealed for these witnesses, and because he's now no longer in the police. He works on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
Because he just didn't want the ridicule. And I thought it was fascinating because he'd seen it on his bike. And I've had another inspector in, the same West Yorkshire, a guy called Adrian Lyles. And he had the same on his bike, overtook him, left-hand side, saucer-shaped bike. And that was in 1976. So it does happen. He was looking at this craft, very good view of it, again, 300 or 400 meters away. And the odd thing about this one is he said he should have been watching the road, but he wasn't. But he honestly felt on that day that whatever it was, and this is nuts, would make sure he didn't crash. And then as it just went out of sight, he thought, I'll look again. He's put his brakes on, and he's then stopped just not far from the barrier in the central reservation. He's tried to go to woodland to find out where this thing has gone because it's disappeared over some trees, and he never saw it again. I mean, look, they can't all be wrong.
It's strange. It's the awareness, Roy, that's so strange. And it's hard for people. I do realise it's hard for people who've never experienced it or never spoken to lots of people who claim to have had these sightings, stroke experiences to believe it. But there's so many people, and that awareness that guy explained to you, I hear that. I don't mean time and time again, but I hear that quite a lot. When we talked about Wilsthorpe, that we'd call it the Wilsthorpe incident, where the UFOs were over the sea and the elderly couple witnessed them for over an hour sighting, but she went to turn an outside light off in her porch, and she thought it were the people who owned the flat next door that had left it on. It were a communal light. But when she went back into the room, she claims a voice said to her, "Go back and have another look." Do you know? And I know that's a detraction from what you've just said. And this guy's believing we won't let you crash, or probably never even said it. It's just an impression he's got in his mind.
Yeah.
But it's a strange thing to come away from with after such an incredible sighting, and it happens so much. Do you know, Filey, 6 miles away from where I'm sat now, there's a former hairdresser, a very elderly lady now, but if you do intend writing more with John, I think I need to introduce you to a son formally first, because he'll then decide whether his mum wants to speak. Scott, they call him, and his mum, being the hairdresser of Filey, this little fishing village in the 1960s/70s, everybody came in, fishermen, police officers, and they talk. And on this particular night, 1960s, I believe, I'm not even sure if I've written about this. If I haven't, I need to do. The police officer were telling her about a chase through the town of Filey, through the fishing town, of what they perceived as a UFO, not very high in the sky, and they were chasing it all over town. And there must have been a big container, a gas container. I think that's what it was. And of all things, this lit up object just went straight into the gas container and disappeared. No damage, nothing. And as far as I'm aware, no police officers ever talked about it openly anywhere else apart from to her. So just how many stories, not just police officers, general public, MOP, Coast Guard, all official bodies, how many stories are going to the grave with people that should be openly shared, so that we all know that this stuff, it just sort of further solidifies the fact that there is a reality to this.
Yeah, and it all comes down to the fear of ridicule and being labelled a tinfoil hatter and crazy, and that's what it all boils down to, unfortunately. And you've either got to make a decision. So I made a decision when I delved into this, because I had to do a release in the Federation magazine to appeal for witnesses, and that was in February. The Federation released the article at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by 8:30, I was talking to my police chief inspector, because he was saying, "What's this article about?"
Yeah. Do you know, that was going to be my question before we go to more questions from Les? And I don't mean that that's what was said to you. This was just going to be thrown out in general. Have you ever been told, be careful what you talk about?
Yeah, but not as in you better be careful, as in these are from my colleagues.
Yeah.
Who've said, look, it's interesting, it's fascinating, and it's amazing how many say, and they'll take the mick out of me in a room, but then on their own, it'll be very different. It will be, I've always thought, or I know someone who saw this, or I watched this documentary once. And when I spoke to my chief inspector, he's a cool guy, but he said, look, what's this about such and such? And I think he's probably concerned about the stigma that it's going to bring to the armed police department, the West Midlands Police, and why are you letting an inspector run around with a firearm who believes in little green men, and
well, that's not the case, Roy, is it?
It concerns them.
That's how it's perceived, but that is just not the case, is it?
No, it isn't the case. I mean, for once, I'm saying, well, I haven't seen anything. I'm just interested, and all I have done with this book is collate the stories, put them together in chapter order in regards to the police forces, and then it's for the reader to make up their own mind.
Yeah.
I've given my opinion at the start of the book in my intro, what I think these craft are, which is, and that is after examining all the best evidence. I believe in Occam's razor, which is, once you've examined all the evidence, what's left at the end of it, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. And it's improbable, but it must be the truth that these are vehicles from elsewhere, not of this planet, because the evidence clearly points there.
Yeah.
So there is a bit of a stigma, and that, but for me, once you don't want to get promoted anymore in the police, And once you can get by it, and you just take the usual 10 or 15 minutes of grief, it's forgotten about. You just carry on, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. But what's come throughout this last hour and a half is that you're not forcing your views on anyone. You've collated all these accounts and reports along with John Hanson, and you, like you just said, you're just laying them out there, and people can form their own opinions. You're not trying to steer anybody in any direction, and I think that's the best way to be, Roy.
It is, and for me, some of the best talks I've had and debates are the ones when I'm speaking with people who are of the complete opposite opinion of me. So
Yeah.
I think debate's healthy, and it's okay to agree to disagree and still remain friends. I'm not going to change my point of view because of my research, but like you say, you collate the evidence, you put it in the book or you put it before someone. But I am convinced if this was a court case, do UFOs exist, yes or no, I would suspect that beyond all reasonable doubt, a jury would find in favour of of myself and the prosecution to prove that they do exist.
Yeah.
You know, so
overwhelming.
it's a slam dunk case.
Yep. So on that note, then we shall go to Les and see whether he's got some questions to wind this down, because we've got about 15 minutes left, Roy. 15.
No problem.
Yes, thanks, guys. Plenty of people on the chat tonight asking questions. Thank you all for your questions. And I've got to say, first of all here, thank you for the 2 super chats we've had in so far. One from Lee Roscoe, and Lee Roscoe is saying, great show as always, truth proof, Cat and the Crew. So that's great, Lee, and thank you very much for your contribution. Always helps. And we have another super chat in with a question attached to this one, so I'll ask this one now, even though I think we've just covered it, Roy. Space Cow has contributed $6.99, and the question is, does Roy ever fear for his well-being when speaking of this stuff? Thanks.
No, I mean, I don't think any shadowy government agents are going to drag poor old me away and with a bag over my head or anything like. I never like that. You know, nothing. No, I just, you know, it might be the case that I suppose if you applied for a position within the police, you might not get it now or whatever, and maybe if you sat a promotion board, oh well, gee whiz, you didn't get picked. But the great thing, and what's very liberating for me, is when you've gone as far as you are going to go in the police rank wise, because you've made that decision, it's almost like you're free to discuss whatever you want to. But I don't fear, you know, all I've ever had is Mickey taking. You know, I had a picture put on my locker of, you know, E.T. and you've got Elliot on the bike and you've got E.T. in the basket. Well, you know, someone superimposed my face on the kid with E.T. in the basket, and I like skydiving. So at one point, my WhatsApp photo was me in the air doing a skydive, and they've somehow put that under the Independence Day massive flying saucer, when that was on my locker. But none of this was malicious or bad in any way. It was. I think if people take the mick out of you and there's good banter, that means that they like you and they're comfortable doing it. And I'm the inspector of the team, and they just rip me all the time, you know. But yeah, not fearing my safety or getting any grief. No, not at all.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question from Lee Roscoe. I've got to ask this one because he tried to send it earlier, Paul, and it's coming a bit late, but I'm going to ask it now. Paul and Roy, what do you think about the material and the story from Mark Ollie covered in the Wales called European Roswell? Is it from Aberystwyth?
I'm not even certain, and I've met Mark Ollie, an absolute archaeologist and a fabulous guy. He had a lot of artifacts at the Awakening. And Lee, you need to educate me. Are we talking about the Berwyn Mountains? Were the material recovered from the, I think it was 1971 alleged flying saucer crash there? I don't know. I wish I could help, and Roy might have more information than me.
It depends what incident, because when you said Wales, initially I thought, is this the Pentruck incident? And then I thought, is it the Berwyn Mountains one?
It 74, I think I got 71. I said, I think it's 74 when it Berwyn. Yeah.
Can I offer you guys some background info on this story?
Yeah, of course.
It's It was on a dark winter's night in January '83. The sleepy Welsh village of Llanila near Aberystwyth was buzzed by a strange flying craft.
Ah, right.
It hit trees, scattered shiny metal debris over 4 fields and flew off, apparently unaffected.
No knowledge of it, Lee. Perhaps you should come on and talk to us about it, but seriously.
That sounds like an interesting one, but that one I don't particularly.
No.
Unless the police are involved in it,
Well,
I'll probably.
Yeah. Well, do you know, when he talks about the shiny material, I know there's one in North Yorkshire, just briefly, because we're going to get to some questions for Roy. And there's a dog walker near a place called Maybeck, which is up on North Yorkshire moors, who saw this object dripping what he perceived as light. And he chased after it and were trying to grab hold of the drips of light. And obviously never did, or I've no knowledge that he did, but
there's quite a few with this dripping light.
Dripping light. Well, let's just go there for a minute then. What have you heard about that?
Well, the first time I came across the dripping light one, when I read a story about it, was Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah.
This winking eye, dripping light. So a lot of people say that it's the heat from the craft. And if it's in the sky, this blows this out of the water. But with Rendlesham and a lot of UFOs that we're seeing near Woodland, they're saying that the heat was that hot, it's melted the sap from the tree, and it's the tree sap dripping off almost on fire. But if the craft was seen in the sky, well, that kind of blows it out of the water because there's no trees in the sky. I don't know. I have no idea.
And I've got a story which I spoke about last night, because there's been a sighting at Bempton. I've spent far too much time up there this week, people, on a night, and I'm up there tomorrow. There's a group of people coming up, but there's an artist painting on the cliff tops at Bempton, so it's daytime. Sees a rectangle of gold light that's dripping light, and over the sea. So what it is, if any of our listeners or anybody wants to get in touch, if they've got any information on this, I'm all ears. And I'm sure likewise, just before we go to more questions, do we have any contact details for you, for anybody that wants to come forward with any police officer related accounts?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I mean, if they don't remember the email address, if I could be cheeky, and if they could, send them to you and then on to me.
Yeah,
I have an email address, and you're more welcome to put it on the screen.
That makes sense. So if you want to send them to all lowercase, Paul Sinclair, ILF for Freddie, at gmail.com, and I will forward anything that you want to send to Roy onto him. Thank you.
Mine's very simple. So it's all lowercase. It's my name, Roy Teague, which is Teague. Imagine league, football league, with a T at the start instead of an L. So Roy Teague at blueyonder.co.uk. So Roy Teague at blueyonder.co.uk, and that'll get through to me. But if you forget that, by all means, email Paul.
Yeah, it's all good. Let's go, Les.
Okay, yes. Did you say it was Roy Teague at Blue Yonder?
Yeah, blueyonder.co.uk.
I'm putting it in the stream description now. Is it co.uk?
It is indeed, yeah.
If you see me reaching up, people, I've got windows open, and so I'm not actually lost the plot. There's some little tiny flies. I don't know what they are. They've just come in. So there you go. Right, Les, questions, please.
Okay, I've saved that in the chat, guys, so the email should be in, not in the chat, in the description for tonight's stream. Okay, so the question is from Nickname. Out of all the phenomena, I'll add that at the beginning, what is the most common reported that is strange?
Is this for Roy?
Yeah. So what's the most commonly reported phenomena as in?
Yeah, I would imagine from that, and let me just decipher what I'm thinking. Is it light spheres of light phenomena? Is it structured type craft, cigar-shaped craft?
So to be fair, I would suggest most of them are the saucer ones rare. I'd say the few cigar ones. I'd say most of them are almost like what we call bowls, which are balls of light, spheres of light, but moving really quick and zigzagging in the sky, not conforming to defying the laws of physics that we'd know. Because if there's a human being inside of those, it would break any pilot's neck. But I'd suggest most of them are balls of light or huge spheres.
So just before Les goes to another question, then, We've gone from 1950s to what with the book?
So it's predominantly 1940 up until
1940 to
up
2016.
until modern day. Although there are a couple of odd ones. There's one from 1909 in there, believe it or not, from an officer. But
Well, the reason I'm asking that is as the shape of these objects changed.
not especially, buddy. You know, balls of light. The difficult thing is, it could be any of those shapes, saucer, cigar shape. But if there's only one light on it and you can't see the outline, I suppose they'd all look like that, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
But
So
I would
the vocabulary's probably changed as we've evolved for the last blooming, I don't know, 80 years. But yeah. Okay, then let's please send us another question.
Yeah, sure. Blue Shift is asking now. Apart from John Hanson, Roy, who is Roy's favourite researcher?
You've got to send me. I'm joking.
Well, of course, there is a guy who I really do rate. There's two actually. There's one guy called Gary Heseltine. Now he started a site called Prufos, which is police-related UFO sightings, and he collated loads. He put them online, and they're a matter of public record. So I could have just got those and put them in a book, because legally I could do that. But I thought, do the right thing. So I sent the guy a message. Can I have a chat? And I rang him, and I explained what I was doing, and I said, would you mind if I got your sightings? And there's a few of them, and can I put them in the book? And he was like, yeah, sure. And I think he's the chairman of the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial, is it research? I think it is.
Yeah.
And he's the head of the British contingent. I know he's just done a talk abroad. I don't know what country, to a load of MPs there. So he's right up there. I've got a lot of time and respect for Gary Heseltine. I think he does a great job. And then there's another guy who is the chairman of BUFOG, which is the Birmingham UFO group, a guy called David Horridon, and he's very good as well. I do like listening to. I go once a month, listen to what he's got to say. And this month, the keynote speaker did let him down because he was poorly, and then so I feel bad because I thought, oh, what are they going to do now? And he said, well, I'm going to fill in for the night. I'm going to do a talk on how we've investigated UFOs, the government has, from this date to this day, and I'll tell you the organisations have changed the name, which is why I know about Arrow and all the rest of it. And it was a great talk. Man, he really knows his business. So I'd say, John's going to be my favourite. I wrote the book with him, didn't I? And I owe a lot to him, and I've learned loads from him. But outside of that, there are some other fine researchers, Gary Heseltine and David Horridon.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good to know. I've met both of them and spent a bit of time with is it David Hodrian?
Yeah,
only at a conference, but he seemed like a great guy to me. I mean, I can't really comment anymore. And Gary Heseltine, I know him years ago before I started looking into Wilsthorpe. I sent him some reports. I didn't know about the Wilsthorpe, what we call the Wilsthorpe incident, until 2014, 2015, when the old couple contacted me. That's when I started writing the first book, and the Bridlington Free Press put an article in saying, budding author wants reports of the strange and unexplained kind of thing. And they contacted me. So I didn't know about that then. However, I did have a website from 2002-ish called ILF UFO. And in 2009, I received loads of UFO reports from East and North Yorkshire, and I mean absolutely masses of them. And one of them involved a lot of activity around Wilsthorpe, and in particular, me actually parking up on dark nights behind police scientific investigation vans in middle of nowhere with big plastic black balls on top of the roof, which I assume were cameras, but much bigger. You might know much more about this than me. And they're just in the middle of nowhere, where I'm looking for, where people have been claiming to see these objects. But I sent all that to Gary, and I never got no response from him, if I'm being truthful. And which is a shame, really, because it would have helped. I mean, and why do I say that? Because I actually wrote it on website. The website's since been closed, but the internet, being the fabulous thing that it is, as archived pages, so it's all still there. And I do write that I sent him the information, and that's no dig at Gary Heseltine. He puts the conferences on, all good. You know, it's just how it is.
Yeah, I do. That's the only sticking point of ufology sometimes, and I have found that myself, and it's a shame really, because you think that, and I found that with some others where I've asked, oh, I know you've got this information, I could do with it for a book, would you mind? Oh, I haven't got it, I can't find it, and it's clearly obvious that they just want to keep their toys to themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know why some do that, because for me, it's a team game, and it ain't about who scores the goals. It's about getting the message out there so people can have the knowledge of what these things are. So if somebody said to me, can I have some info? I know you've got it for X, Y, I'd be like, yeah, mate, no problem. Even if their book would be out next week before mine, I would still give them the information, because I don't mind. I want the information to get out there.
It does it in
Not
grand
everybody
scheme of
does that.
things. In grand scheme of things, Roy, you would write it up different to me. They would still find your version of the events, providing you're sticking to storyline, as interesting and rereadable. So I don't mind at all. I mean, when you spoke to me, well, John initially said, have you got any police reports? And you contacted me. I just said, yeah, I've what I've got, kind of thing. Because we've got to do that. If we've got to share the information. Otherwise, it's no good coveting it to ourselves, is it?
No, because it limits it to a very closed audience. And you want to share it with a wider audience because you want the message out there. But unfortunately, not everybody's of the same.
No, they're not.
Character, and it's unfortunate.
We've 7 minutes left thereabouts, so let's just see if Les can fit a few more questions in. You're good for that, Roy?
Yeah, I'm just going to go in order here, guys. No favoritism whatsoever. Patricia Adams, right, is asking, how many sightings have you had, Roy? I know you answered this earlier on.
Yeah, personally, I haven't had any. No. So I'd love to say I had to. Roy Teague is had a sighting. That's what inspired him, but it wouldn't be true. I haven't had any.
No, it's good.
Nickname is asking, what is Roy's most profound case? I guess Nickname is referring to the forthcoming book.
Probably, I'm pretty sure it was Cheshire Police, and they had a police pursuit with a UFO, and there were probably about 20 officers involved in various different cars. There's a flying cross involved and all sorts of stuff. But I haven't mentioned that this evening because some of the details I'm still working on and trying to iron out. But that involved, you need a faster, one was saying to somebody else, you need a quicker car, you're not going to catch it. And then it's gone over the county border, and then the next force have picked it up, and so on, and it's gone. And that led John to then research his archives about flying crosses, and there's about 4 or 5 flying cross sightings of UFOs. And I mean, flying cross is nuts.
I've got one from a police officer, so you need to contact me after, next few days.
It wouldn't surprise me if John, I will do, but
John hasn't got it. John hasn't got it. This is from a place called Burton Fleming, and once again, it's 2009. And I've spoke to him face to face. We've done a little bit of a chat, and so
I'll harass you and stalk you out and get that off you then.
Yeah, it's all good.
Patricia Adams Wright is asking another question. And now I know you're on the Truth Proof live stream with Paul Sinclair, Roy, tonight, but the question is, what's Roy's favourite UFO book, non-fiction?
No, good question.
That's tough.
You can say one of mine if you want, Roy.
I mean, Truth Proof is pretty good. I'm looking around, and I'm old school, to be honest. I am old school, so I'm probably going to say, looking beyond on the shelf behind me, I think it's a shame that he's. I'll tell you what it is. It's on the shelf right now, and she's no longer with us. And that is, You Can't Tell the People by Georgina Bruni.
Georgina Bruni, yeah.
That probably is it, because she took everyone's opinion in account, and she, because there's a lot of politics in some specific sightings, like Rendlesham at the moment. You've almost got like a civil war, and it's a bit sad to see, really. Give an opinion, and if someone disagrees, just say you disagree. But we don't get that, and I like that. I thought she was very on the fence. I thought the book was very balanced, and both sides of the argument had a lot of respect for her. So I would say Georgina Bruni, You Can't Tell the People.
And You Can't Tell the People. Well, that like kind of the subtitle what Margaret Thatcher said. on the subject of UFOs, you can't tell the people. Is
Well, she said to her, what about she actually said to her in person, Georgina Brunei, look, what about the UFOs? Because there'd been a bit of a kerfuffle in the press about it at the time, and she said, yeah, I've got the answers, but you can't tell the people. And she meant you can't tell the people about the answers with the UFOs. But she never then elaborated on the truth to Georgina, but that's just the quote she gave.
Excellent.
Probably my last question on tonight's show, guys. Alison Buttle is asking, where is Roy from?
Wolverhampton.
Oh, Wolverhampton.
Yeah.
And there's your answer, Alison. On that note, guys, I think we are about to wrap. So if you want to do your...
No, I've had an excellent time. I've really enjoyed speaking to Roy. So as far as I'm concerned, Roy, thank you very much. If we can discuss this again and talk about some more accounts at a later date, I'd love to. And thank you. I'll leave you to say good night.
Thanks for having me on the show, and good night, and good night to everyone watching.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, guys, for a great show tonight. Thank you for the super chat from the two people who gave the super chat tonight. And it always helps our cause. I've got to say, it has been a bad day today with the news that came out earlier. So, you know, if we've looked a little bit down, then that's probably the reason. But, on a good note, I'm sure we'll catch you next week on another live stream from Truth Proof. Bye.